Good evening again. And this is the school board study session. It's Monday, June 22nd, 2020. And this study session tonight is being conducted remotely via Hangouts Meet. It is being live streamed by BEC TV and will be replayed per the usual BEC TV replay schedule. Okay, so let's start with our first item in the agenda tonight, which is the fall planning. And I'd like to call Mr. John Weiser and all your guests to present tonight.
Thank you, Chair Corman. Can I get a thumbs up from somebody that you can see the presentation? Great. Good evening, Chair Corman, Superintendent Fujitaki, board members. I'm here tonight with Andy Kubis, Executive Director of Learning and Teaching, Rachel Jens, Director of Curriculum and Instruction, Jennifer McIntyre, Executive Director of Student Services, and Katrina Mesra, Digital Learning and Data Manager. We're here tonight to review with the board and the viewing public the current planning for the 2021 school year. We started our planning in May, way back in May, when it became clear that the district needed multiple options for families this fall. At that time, the Minnesota Department of Education first named 3 models: the traditional model, the hybrid model, and distance learning. While school was still in session, we sought feedback from our families and staff, which you've reviewed in prior board sessions. The plans you see tonight are built on that stakeholder feedback, as well as the evolving information from the Department of Education. Just last Thursday, MDE produced an extensive planning guide, 100 pages in length, by the way. We've been poring over that document and find that our current planning for fall is aligned with MDE scenarios. Additionally, the Department of Education has said it will provide more clarity throughout the summer, including the last week of July. So we want to review with you our planning for the 3 Department of Education models, that's distance learning, hybrid, and traditional, as well as an option for Bloomington Online School, an online option for families. I'm going to pass the presentation to Andy Kubis, Executive Director of Learning and Teaching, to kick us off. Andy.
Thanks, Mr. Weiser. Good evening, everyone. Chair Corman, Superintendent Fujitaki, board members. As John talked about, here to just give you some updates on our planning thus far. And so I wanted to start out with talking what we are referring to as distance learning 2.0. If last spring was distance learning 1.0, this is the next iteration. So just some grounding things to get you situated. We've received a lot of feedback on how distance learning went. And so we've received feedback unsolicited. We've received plenty of solicited feedback as it comes to surveys from parents, from our teaching staff, talked to some students as well. And so we've got a lot of feedback, and if I could encapsulate it, I would say on balance, we did pretty well with distance learning 1.0. I would say there's probably not a school district in the nation who nailed it. Nobody chose it. As I've referred to it in this very meeting in the past, this is emergency school. We had 8 days to prepare for something that could have taken us 8 months to do it right. But we were extended a lot of grace, and I think that grace came from a couple different things. One, we didn't pretend, that we knew what we were talking about or we knew what we were doing. We were in it like everyone else, and we evolved and listened and made changes. Every week, as I've shared before, we had 2 meetings, distance learning problem solving meetings consisting of cabinet members, principals, teachers, other staff members. And it was just roll your sleeves up and what happened this week and what can get better? What are our parents asking for? What are our teachers asking for? And we took that feedback, and what's being overused now, we built the airplane in the air. And so we did decently well. Having said that, we know that there are some students and some families that we absolutely were left behind. And I don't think it was because of Bloomington's distance learning plan. I think it's because of distance learning, that there are just families who don't thrive in that type of environment. And we knew that, and credit to the teams who tried to go back alongside those students and families and bring them back. up to speed, but we know that there are just some families who struggle in that. It's not something anybody would choose, or it's not something very many people would choose, I would say. As we move into distance learning 2.0, the general statement we would make here is that we know that it has to be more inclusive and cast a wider net to catch more students and families, and we've gotten pretty good at that. And we can get better at that. And so that's kind of the driving force behind 2.0. And again, talking about the feedback, that's what we're using to make that 2.0 better. Just to give you an idea about process and where we are currently, got Kelly Spees facilitating that design process from distance learning 1.0 to 2.0. And she's designed a feedback system and is continuing to gather data and input and doing the planning. So just some landmark dates that I wanted to share with you. Administration and teacher leaders debrief distance learning. Like I said, we started in March and we went all the way to present. So when school was out, we just talked about, we took all of the data that we had, all the changes we made, and we started debriefing about what went well and what might we want to change. As I mentioned, we have staff, parent, and student feedback on distance learning shared through surveys, etc. And we went through the distance learning planning team and encapsulated all of that feedback. It was a lot of feedback, and that's good. It was feedback from, like I said, all kinds of stakeholders. But that group did, so just, perhaps again, for a grounding situation, as John mentioned, the MDE released a document about how to do fall planning. They did the same thing when we went to distance learning. They released a template that we had to follow to make sure that our distance learning plan was the right plan. And there were 15 guiding questions there. And they were hard questions that we had to use and figure out as we navigated through distance learning. The process I really like that Kelly used with this team is she took that very same document, the 15 guiding questions, and they put the feedback. They went through all of the feedback and came up with, there was, I think, 102 recommendations for distance learning 2.0. And so took that feedback and we put it in different categories and then reached out to some key stakeholder groups to make sure that they're on board with distance learning. We had our special education group that was reached out upon, English language learners, learning supports, or early childhood, and so on, just to say, what was your feedback and what things how would you want your voice in distance learning 2.0? Knowing once again that this is not going to be something that anyone chooses, that this is going to be something that we're probably forced to do for whatever reason. We can imagine different scenarios where we have to revert back to a distance learning. And so that would be our distance learning 2.0. Timeline going forward. We would like to have, using that template, we would like to have something sketched out by the June 30th. Just thinking about all of that feedback, like I said, 102 different recommendations. And it's interesting, we had 400 plus, I think 450 teachers who took the distance learning survey to give our feedback, but that also means there are about a half of the teachers who didn't take it. And so just trying to figure out, what is that balance? And no matter where you come from, what was evident in the feedback is although there are themes, there was nobody, no theme that drove us one way or another. It just depended who you talked to. There were some teachers who said this wasn't great for me. This wasn't great for my family. I've got 3 kids at home of my own. How am I supposed to do this? And while there's other feedback and said, this worked out really well. I'm a night owl and I did everything at 10 o'clock at night. So just depending on who you talk to, you get a different flavor, and it's that team's job to go through and look for themes. And we're beginning to see some themes. I stole an idea from Executive Director Weiser, what I picked up off of him with all of that feedback, just copied and pasted every bit of feedback and put it into a Wordle. And just to say, what are the words that are coming out? Like, instead of going through all of this, at first blush, what is it? And I was happy to see that the 2 words that were the largest in a Wordle. So you take all of that feedback and then whatever words are said the most become the largest. Families and students were the 2 words that were the largest. And so that was invigorating to me, thinking that people are still in the right spot, thinking that this is the reason why we're here. Not too much smaller was teachers. And so that's important too, that we're putting all of those things back together. So to finish up with the distance learning so far, we'll run that, put that plan together, and then as we get plan and stakeholder feedback, we want to make sure that we're bringing people together to make sure that this is what we heard feedback say, is that what's happening? And then we want to make sure we get feedback, intentional feedback, was really important for the group that they reach out to our historically disenfranchised families. Oftentimes our families don't take surveys, those historically disenfranchised families. Oftentimes their feedback comes through conversation with trusted school district people. And so making sure we leverage those relationships to make sure that everyone is represented in this work. And so that's our process. And we're, again, as John mentioned, we're awaiting further feedback from NDE. We know that something's going to come out near the end of July, but we think we're pretty well positioned to take 1.0 and move it to 2.0 and have a plan moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to, I believe it's the hybrid team.
Thanks, Andy. I'm Katrina Mesra, Digital Learning and Data Manager, and I'm going to talk you through the hybrid plan and where we're at so far. So hybrid refers to a plan whereby about half the students are in school at any given time, and the other half are learning remotely. And so we started at the kind of, as school was wrapping up in the last couple of weeks, meeting daily to try and look at all the different models that are out there. Plenty of research, you know, countries around the world to other states giving guidance, and look at all those different models, something like an AM/PM model to a 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off model, and start narrowing those based on feedback from our stakeholders that we've been collecting, but also every step along the way. Our goal then, the first week of June, was really to get to the bare bones of a plan, that strong little skeleton there, just, you know, that first decision to get to something that we can start building on throughout the summer. You know, Andy referenced it well, that we did a great job responding to an emergency, and with 3 months in the summer here, we want to use them and do what we can to be ready for the fall. So did that in June, kind of started narrowing down what are some of the top contenders that are going to work best based on our stakeholders. And now we're pivoting in June through August into different work groups, looking at instruction, management, learning supports, and then also looking at a fall planning leadership team in terms of how do those things work together. And I'll turn this slide over to Jennifer McIntyre.
Thank you, Katrina. I appreciate the moment. I wanted to express to the board and then also to our larger audience that we have expanded out those work groups so that we are really making some considerations specifically around specialized instruction, going all the way from our youngest early child special education from birth all the way up to our work experience and our age 21. As we dig deeper and take a deeper dive into how do we do service delivery models across all areas within special education, specifically within this hybrid area is where we've really needed to take a deeper and closer look. So as Katrina was talking through those work groups, we've expanded out those work groups to include several staff members, paraprofessionals, and families, actually parents, into discussion to look at all of these areas for service delivery models going into the fall, but then also around what due process procedures do we need to have in place as we're making considerations for families that make sense moving into the fall. So I wanted to make sure that I was able to highlight that within this presentation today. Katrina, thank you. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. So as I was saying, you know, we're depending heavily on feedback loops because we know that there's a lot of stakeholders with a lot of moving pieces. And so just on the left side there, throughout our, you know, kind of rapid iteration here, we did a leadership survey, got 99 responses on that, sort of validating what our top models might be. Asked another 60 staff saying this seems to be a top model. Then we interviewed parents and students. We conducted 67 interviews, many of those via a translator, in order to get some family representation about here's what we're thinking might happen in the fall. What would be the impact on your family? So to make sure that we were considering, you know, what exactly this might look like for our family and community. And then we did a staff survey, giving all of our staff opportunity to kind of weigh in on what these different models or bone structures might look like. And then also the fall planning leadership team definitely has weighed in to look at kind of a systems perspective as well. Some general trends that we see in all of that feedback, consistency across levels is needed. You know, there's all those pieces, a kindergartner and a senior are remarkably related when you stop and look at it. 30 to 40% of staff don't feel any model is viable. what that tells us is that staff are really, there's a lot changing right now, and that they need a lot of guidance and understanding about what this can look like and how we can make all these new pieces work. Consistent days are much better than rotating days. Pretty consistently in feedback, parents would rather deal with a Monday and Thursday at school day rather than Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 1 week, Tuesday, Thursday, the next week. And then, kind of a rotating difference week to week. We know our families need some options. We heard from many families that some wanted their kiddos to go to school. If they weren't going to school physically full-time, that some of them wanted their kids to go together. Others said, I really need them split up so that I can work differently at home. That's what's going to work for my family. So we hear that from them. We hear a varying health risk tolerance. Some people are ready to come back. Others are very hesitant to do so based on their own risk tolerance. And then, our common ground always that we get to get rooted back in is that we all want our students to learn, and we want our students and staff to be physically, mentally, and socially healthy. And so keeping that at the forefront helps us make all these decisions. So just a brief look at the bones that I was mentioning. These are some of the models we looked at. AM, PM cohorts, alternating days, 8A, B day, grade level cohorts, 9th grade goes one day, 10th grade goes another day, all those different models. And that's where we started and kind of started narrowing those down. In order to do that, we looked at 5 different categories. Given that we're in a pandemic, we of course looked closely at physical health and safety that different models would afford. High quality instruction and learning is always important to us. SEL and mental health supports are equally as important. Making sure that we're picking a model that will allow us to support special populations and the varying needs of our students and families. And then of course, school and district operations, things that we can actually pull off and are viable within all of our constraints. With that, I'll turn it over to Rachel.
So after looking carefully at all of the feedback provided through the channels that Katrina just highlighted, we worked to align the initial models that became front runners under one umbrella so that we could begin more in-depth planning with the consistency that was advocated for by the stakeholders in the feedback that we received. And so we've termed our recommended model an assigned days model. And under this model, all students would be assigned to physically attend their brick and mortar school at least 1 day per week for face-to-face instruction. And on the days that students are not physically attending school, they would engage in remote learning using a combination of both digital and analog materials and tools. And so to give you a glimpse of what this might look like, at the elementary level, given current health and safety guidelines, our class sizes and average classroom square footage, we are hopeful that at the elementary and middle level, all students could be assigned 2 days to physically attend school. So for example, the total student population at each school would be divided in half. One group would attend on Monday and Thursday. The other group would attend on Tuesday and Friday, and a limited number of students who were identified as needing some additional supports or who had, for example, an IEP or a 504 plan that would benefit from additional instruction would be scheduled to attend a 3rd or possibly in some cases a 4th day. At the high school level, given those same constraints around health and safety, class sizes, and physical space, we would assign all high school students to physically attend 1 day per week with a limited number of students, again, being assigned additional days as needed. Katrina mentioned earlier that we used 5 filters: physical health and safety, high quality instruction and learning, social emotional learning and mental health supports, supports for special populations, and school and district operations to narrow the possible models for hybrid instruction. And so I'd like to provide a summary of how the assigned days model addresses considerations within each of those 5 areas. So the assigned days model allows for social distancing, both on district transportation vehicles and in classrooms to occur. It also provides sufficient time for cleaning and disinfecting of spaces and materials on a daily basis, and limits potential exposure by grouping students into consistent cohorts for attendance, limiting the number of students that would be in contact with each other on a regular basis. From a teaching and learning perspective, a full day versus a half-day model, for example, allows for deeper instruction to occur and for more subjects to be addressed throughout the day. It also minimizes the amount of time lost to transitions and transportation and provides for spaced intervals of in-person learning and contact with teachers and other staff members. This model also provides an opportunity for students to have in-person interactions with their teachers and classmates to get that mental health and social emotional learning that they need. And it allows for staff to do regular check-ins with students related to mental health so that supports can be provided as needed. In order to support special populations, the model has options for additional face-to-face instruction built in for those identified students needing additional support. And then finally, we believe this model balances the instructional and social emotional learning needs of students with potential constraints related to transportation, cleaning and disinfecting, and making accommodations for staff with significant health concerns. And so that provides you an overview of how we landed on the assigned days model. Next step will be to start moving into some work groups to start putting the muscles and the tendons and the ligaments on the skeleton that you see pictured there. And I'll turn it back over to Executive Director Kubis to talk about the traditional model.
Hello again. John, if you want to. Yeah. So the traditional model, just to give you again some background, we know how to do school. We've done it for, I think it's 103 years in Bloomington. I think maybe 102 and 2/3 with the shutdown, but we've done it for a long time. And so the MDE lists traditional school as an option, and because of that, we should follow suit in our alignment. We should be prepared for that. Second point I want to make is that we should be prepared for all situations. And while it seems unlikely currently, we should be ready for a traditional school option. We never know what's going to happen. I will insert at this time, we've not started deep planning for the traditional model. As I said, we know how to do it. We also know that with organizational capacity and the work that's being done with the hybrid that you just heard about, and then the online version, I want to make sure that we're putting all of our efforts into thinking about those new things and being able to loop back into the traditional sense, but we will come back to it. More current thinking is that we simply need a home base to ground our work. You know, we need a North Star, if you will, to be able to come back to and remember what traditional is like. I think we all have the same sentiment that traditional will never be traditional like we know it anymore. We've learned a lot in things like distance learning. We've learned a lot about how to outreach to families that shouldn't be just for distance learning. They should be for all learning going forward. And so while it won't be exactly the same, we still have to have some sort of grounding. And then finally, families and students are often anchored in familiarity. And someday a large percent of us will return to normal school. We have to keep that in our forefront. And so the next piece of that is that we're also going to have to be talking about what are we going to be doing for some kind of a pivot or some kind of transition from a hybrid to traditional. We should be thinking about that transition as well. And so similar to the hybrid model, as we begin thinking about a traditional setting, we think about the same things, the same 5 things that Katrina talked about: the physical health and safety, our high quality instruction, mental health and supports, supporting our special populations, and school district operations. Again, there were many lessons learned in distance learning. Can't tell you how many emails I got from staff members who said, boy, I hope that we don't forget this when we move forward. And this meant about, like I said, how we reach out to families and students, the special care that we give to our families, that can't be lost and go back to the way we always used to do things. So that part will also be incorporated in the traditional piece. Again, we hope to have all of this settled as we move forward. At the same time as the MDE releases their guidance, we want to be on pace with them. And we are happy, as John talked about, that our planning mirrors the MDE's planning as they release their 100-page document. Turn it over to the hybrid group. I'm
Thanks,
sorry,
Andy.
online group, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right, thanks. So you've heard about those three models so far, what MDE terms as the traditional model, the hybrid model, and the distance learning model. I want to spend a few minutes talking to you about a new model, Bloomington Online School. Our current community relations and REA surveys showed that, this is back in May and the start of June, it showed us that 32% of our families surveyed were uncertain about returning to face-to-face school in the fall. 26% of those that were uncertain said that they were fully considering online options. So we know we've got some families who are actively looking for choices. Our staff survey showed that 16% of staff were uncertain about returning to work, and half of those staff who replied to that survey expressed some interest in teaching or providing support in an online program. Additionally, we have a pretty good track record around providing online options. We're in the second year of providing fully online courses at our high schools, and we hit a milestone this year in that 40% of our high school students have taken at least one course entirely online in the 1920 school year. So we have some current successes and experience. We have families that we know are actively looking for online options. And we believe that the options and experiences we build now will present future opportunities and programming throughout our K-12 system. Some of that feedback and learning that you heard about distance learning. For these reasons, we're developing a K-12 online program to begin in the fall called Bloomington Online School. Our elementary work groups are led by Elementary Digital Learning Coordinator Holly Skadsum, with partners in learning and teaching and special education. Elementary programming is being designed to be responsive to student needs, to take an interdisciplinary approach, to have a balance of on and off-screen activities, both equally important, and to be intentional about building relationships and community among students, something we heard very strongly from our feedback in distance learning. Our secondary work groups are led by Andrew Rummel. He's our secondary digital learning coordinator. As with elementary, there's a focus on building collaborative community with considerations for academic as well as social emotional needs of students. Courses will be engaging, they'll be interactive, and based on feedback from distance learning this spring, we will be emphasizing consistency in course practices. Things like having a single platform for all online students, posting work in a similar format, and so on. This summer, we were fortunate enough to get to the University of Minnesota, and they agreed to partner with us to accelerate this work. We know we have a short runway. We have a lot of staff working diligently to create an online program that we can all be proud of, including content developers and work groups to tackle some of the real difficult challenges we know are ahead of us. These groups include school leaders. We've got many principals on our work groups, classroom teachers, special education and EL teachers, and student support staff. Additionally, we're beginning a parent advisory for our online program to assist and help guiding. So for Bloomington Online School, the summer is largely about information sharing and program development. You can see where we're at right on the end of that July or that June band heading into July. We're targeting to register students by late July. August will be a time for professional development and parent information for a successful launch on the first day of school, August 31st. So that's an overview of the four models. You've seen Distance Learning 2.0, Hybrid, Traditional School, and Bloomington Online School. Two key dates that stand out for this summer are a return to school community engagement event on July 14th. Actually, and the day before that, you just approved a board meeting for July 13th, so that would be a third date. And as Andy mentioned, the Minnesota Department of Education has said it will provide additional clarity in the last week of July. So we're hoping by August 1st that we'll have a much clearer picture to talk all of our constituent groups through. Until then, we'll continue to adjust our planning. We'll update the community. We'll update you all as we get more information and clearer guidance. With that, we welcome the board's questions.
Thank you, Mr. Weiser, and thank you to all the members of your team for presenting tonight, and also all the people who are not here with you tonight, but that have participated in different areas and different ways. And thank you for addressing the bones guy, because I was really wondering about how I was going through the presentation. I'm really concerned about all those bones, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that, you know, with a lot of meeting included in the near future presentations. Thank you. Any questions, please, from the board members? Let's start with Director Sorum.
Hi, thank you. And I just can't imagine so much of this work is being done virtually because you're not all there in the offices where you can talk back and forth and here, try this and try that. So thanks an awful lot for doing that. I think I noticed on Rachel's clock behind her, it says it's 10 minutes to 9. So I just will say to change the batteries. But anyhow, so one of my concerns is as a grandparent with 5 kids in the school district and having the daughter teaching and the husband being gone in the National Guard, I'm nervous about being the at-home person with the kids as a grandparent and my wife and so forth like that. So addressing some of the days on and days off and transportation and all that, which is going to be solved, I know, shortly. There are all these other volunteers or people that are going to be needed to assist the teachers with helping kids at home, and especially in special education and some of those, would be it paras or whoever it is. But so that's my big concern is how many volunteers might we wind up needing to help out these families who are going back to work now and have the kids that have experienced a little bit of distance learning, but not totally. So anybody can answer. Anybody can give me help.
432 is the answer, Jim. No, that's, you know, we're in this constant flux of new information and new clarity, and so our intent tonight is to reveal one more layer of clarity for you all, for our public, for the viewing audience, and our staff, who we think are paying close attention to what their fall look like. We will need, under most of these models, we will need care for students who are not in direct instruction. So your point is well taken.
Thank you. Other questions? And before we continue with questions, I am not able to see Director Bibi in the screen. So Director Bibi, if you can hear me, and if you would like to ask a question or make a comment, please just go ahead and open your microphone. We'll go with Director Starks.
So I want to echo Director Sorum's thanks to all of you for all of this work. I know that this is just an amazing undertaking. And when I saw the 100-page document that came from MDE, I thought, oh goodness. So I'm excited to hear that the work you've already done is matching that, so that you're not having to redo or rethink things. And I'm also very appreciative of the hybrid learning having at least a little bit of structure, the bones, right? Of like, now we at least know we're doing that model of hybrid. Obviously, there's a lot of decisions that go with it, but I think as a parent, and what I've been hearing from other parents, that was kind of the
a source of stress was not understanding what hybrid was really going to look like. So I'm very grateful that you brought that forward. I'm going to ask one question that might be the tendons and ligaments. So if you don't know this answer, that's totally fine. For high school students, or actually middle school and high school, when they have multiple teachers that have different subject area expertise, is the expectation that they'll be interacting with all of those teachers when they're in-person learning, or are they only going to be allowed to interact with one other adult while they're at school because of the safety issues?
That's a great question. I can attempt to answer it. It is a little bit of the ligaments, and so I wouldn't say it's well defined yet. But MDE's guidance is that we keep students in cohorts that minimize contact as much as possible with a large population of students. But certainly in order to receive instruction from the appropriate licensed person, we could envision potentially a model where students stay together, but teachers rotate through that cohort so that the person with the appropriate license and the appropriate subject area expertise is providing the instruction to students.
Awesome, thank you. I have more questions, but I'm gonna let those go and let you plan later, and maybe we'll follow up later. And then, I actually have one more question. This is maybe for Mr. Kubis or Mr. Weiser. Is the thought that as we go out through the year, we may have to kind of dip and dive and go distance learning to hybrid to distance learning, or are we looking at this as a little more linear, like we'll do one version and then we'll continue with the next version and go on?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. I was explaining it to a person actually dropping off our kids at the hockey rink that it's a little bit like planning a trip to Europe, and what country you're going to, we're not sure. How are you going to get there? I don't know. I mean, we know we're going on a trip, but we don't have any of the particulars, and you just kind of have to play the odds, quite frankly, and say, what is it? So the scenario that we find ourselves coming back to is being flexible. And so, however we might start, playing the odds now, let's say we're starting in a hybrid version, and then let's say there's an outbreak at a site and we have to switch to distance learning while there's cleaning. Let's say that there's a vaccine that's come up. Like, there's just so many different intangibles that can come up. We have to prepare to go between all of the different versions, and then knowing to what John Weiser was talking about, knowing that there are some families. I mentioned that most families did not like distance learning. I'm a Bloomington family. We're the same way. Some did, and some families really appreciated it. I think we could all recount stories, but one that sticks with me is talking with a parent who said, I need an online version. I've got a second grade student at home. My elderly parents live with us. Until there's a vaccine, I can't have my son bring anything home. And so we just have to be ready for all of those things.
Thank you. I appreciate all your answers.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, Director Starks, is that the governor's metaphor of the dials, we tried to replicate, and so that dial could be on hybrid. We think it'll be on hybrid for most students, but it could switch over to distance learning for some people, and it could switch over to traditional at some point. It will be switched back to traditional.
Thank you. Director Olson.
Yeah, I really appreciate all that you are doing to prepare for all scenarios, and have been ahead of the game, I believe. I am just wondering if people have seen too the new I had just read in the New York Times on this weekend that about a multi-system inflammatory syndrome. A lot of people are pushing that we must go back to school and the children aren't affected, and this is actually a condition that they're now, they're seeing it. It's very rare, but they're seeing it grow, and they believe it's linked to COVID-19, which it causes a delayed overreaction of the immune system, and that directly does affect children. And so I'm just pointing this out because a lot of people are saying, that we should be able to go back to school and we shouldn't do this online school, and we don't know. And that's why I'm glad that you're preparing for everything.
I will say we have some great expertise within the district. Hannah Hatch, who's out on maternity leave now, twice weekly, we meet in a group of a fall planning group that's about 15 people strong, cabinet members, learning and teaching representatives. And Hannah was part of that group during the spring. She turned over that responsibility to Jackie Johns, another licensed nurse in the district. And we're partnering with an outside consultant around the medical implications as well. So yeah, we're watching those things closely, relying on our local expertise to give us good guidance.
Thank you.
Director Bennett.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that was a lot of information. So thank everybody for their hard work on all this. I have several questions, mostly around the hybrid and the online, since those are new. You know, we've done the traditional and the distance, so I don't have a lot of questions with that. But one of the questions I have for the hybrid, or concerns I have, is teacher workload. And I'm thinking, okay, if we're going to do like A days and B days, so let's say like a 5th grade classroom, you have 30 kids, so you see half of them on Monday and Wednesday, and the other half on Tuesday and Thursday. So then on that Friday, or is that same classroom teacher can be expected to provide all of the online learning for all of their students, or is there going to be another teacher specifically working on the distance learning aspect of the hybrid model? Or have you guys gotten to that part yet?
More ligaments and muscles, Director Bennett, but I can talk about some of the preliminary discussions that we've had about that. Teacher capacity is certainly high on our list of considerations, and making sure that the model is workable for our staff. And so at that elementary and middle school level, where there's that alternating days kind of model in place, we envision the focused instruction, some of the direct instruction and collaborative learning activities happening on those face-to-face in-person days, and then opportunities for peer collaboration through Google Meets or independent learning activities through some of the digital learning tools that we have can happen on those days where the teachers are providing feedback on that, but not necessarily providing direct instruction to the students who are remote, while also providing direct instruction to the students who are in the building.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure you guys have been having this question, or been, addressing this as we go along, but it's just one of the concern that I have, just because I talked to several teachers, the distance learning, that they were working a lot harder than they've ever worked in their lives. I'm sure you've heard that as well. And if now we're shifting, okay, now you're taking that, but you're also going to be teaching 4 days a week. And it's like, okay, that's going to be burning our teachers out quickly. And I'm just hoping that we can, find a solution to where we're not, working past their capacity and they're just burning out by October or something. So, but I'm sure you guys are on top of that. Another question I had is, I think Katrina was talking about, or someone like some families want their kids on the same days. Like if you have like 3 kids, you want them all on A days. Some of them might want on A and B days. So would we be able to accommodate that?
That's a good question. The common answer. I think, there's multiple factors in terms of transportation, and, transportation is obviously complicated in this situation because buses have a lower capacity with the guidelines as well. What we're surfacing is that our families, we talked to one parent who has 7 kids, and they said, I'd prefer that they weren't all home doing their remote portion of hybrid all together. At the same time, it would be easier in terms of resources and supporting them, and if half of them were home at the same time, which I can totally respect. Whereas other families said, I'd prefer that my kids were home at the same time, because those would be days I'd be working from home, or I'd need to arrange care, or sounds like Director Sorum just offered to, help out some families. That's what I heard. So, we know that our families are going to need, it's a new situation. And so they're saying, I'll work with you to make it work as much as I can, but I need you to meet me halfway. So that's our goal within the
Okay,
constraints.
logistically, that sounds complicated, but that's one of the other challenges. And also, so is there going to be an option at all of you guys to be like maybe a hybrid and a traditional? Like if there's families that say, I want my kids in school Monday through Friday, even though we're doing a hybrid model, are we going to be able to accommodate that, or is it pretty much going to be all or nothing that your choices are hybrid or the online school? We can't do Monday through Friday.
I don't think we'll legally be allowed to have students, according to the current MDA guidance, we will not legally be allowed to have students back 5 days a week by request. It'd be only if they said, we want Minnesota students or Minnesota districts have the option of going back to traditional school, and then we would have to make that decision, how to do that and what it would entail, but not by request. We couldn't under the current guidance.
Okay. All right, I got some more questions on the online, but I'll go ahead and yield so other board members can ask some questions.
Yes, I would like to read what Director Bibi wrote. Since she's not able to speak because of connection issues, she says, I like the consistency of ELE and middle school students attending 2 days a week at schools. I know parents are needing this type of information. Every little glimpse of what might be will help the community see adjustments they will need to make. My concern about SEL and student well-being hopefully will open up with the 2 days at school model. Okay. If anybody wants to say anything about that, administration?
I'll just make a comment that reflects what we saw in all the feedback around this spring, which led us to, in each of these models, an emphasis on teacher-student connections and student-student connectivity. We weren't able to do that when we had 8 days to get the whole system over to a distance learning model, and so we recognized there were some gaps there in those lost connections. And so going back through our slides, hopefully you see that prioritized in a way that if we have 3 months to plan, be more planful about how we want to present school, that relationships and those kind of connections are top priorities for us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any other board members, comments? Director Sorum.
Yeah, I have now, do all of the students have their Chromebooks now, or those who want them have them? And so they can access or do whatever they're doing, anticipating if they have some parents or connections with the teachers might be telling them, try this, do this, and get ready for next fall.
We did allow all students to keep their personal devices or their student devices over the summer. We did some swap outs with 5th grade, but any family that wanted to keep a device, they could. We have between 10 and 20% of our student population who's involved in a summer program, everything from summer school to trying to get a little bit ahead with online FIED or some other things. So some of them have distinct programs they're in, but the majority of our students are using resources, a resource page that's connected to the district website for what you can do when you have a student device at home over the summer. So I think you mentioned direct teacher contact. There isn't really direct teacher contact between that majority and back to the district, because most of our teachers are recharging their batteries or are in PD or are helping us do this planning. So, but we think families are using those resources well.
Director Olson.
Are there resources for parents to, for the different issues that they come across trying to do the online schooling at home, as far as, maybe commonly asked questions or how to get your child to become a self-directed learner, for example? And that might not even be in our district, but are there resource links that we're able to give them, or within our, or
I
outside?
know within programs that we have developed where online is a component, that is a significant concern and something that we address. And so we know that we will need those resources. I can't think of a direct link right now in summer, but I know that we will need those resources in the fall to take care of, as well as parent resources. What do I do with what's the best way to parent in a distance learning environment or in a hybrid environment?
Very good.
Thank you. Just one quick question about the online learning. So the families that will decide for that option, can the student choose the classes that the student would like for online learning? Is that an option? Can the student take a few and then do the other model?
Depends on level. So like I said, we have 40% of our high school students in this last year. We're doing that partial model. And in the hybrid, again, let's predict that the hybrid model will be the model we'll be opening within the fall. We'll still have a large population of our high school students taking some of their courses online. So they're in the traditional model, they're still showing up 2 days a week, but of the 6 courses they take, maybe 2 of those are actually online courses and the other 4 are face-to-face. That's kind of a normal translation of our traditional school into hybrid. The purely online option is for those families who really can't set foot in a school. Either they're medically vulnerable or they have a family situation whereby they just can't. And we'll have a package of courses for every one of those students. You'll get the full 9th grade experience or the full 6th grade experience, but you may have some limited choices right out of the gate. We can't offer every exploratory offered in middle school, for instance, just because of our 3-month runway, and online learning works a little differently than traditional school.
Right. Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you for the work you've been doing. One of you talked about expertise and how many people we got in our school district that really know, how to put all those things together. And that includes also our teachers, all different staff members. And so I'm really grateful for that and for you guys to be ahead of the game and really already, bring this to the school board for our knowledge and to the community as well. Yeah, once again, just kind of echoing some of the questions and concerns that other board members had, to be mindful as we continue to work through those different models to keep ourselves mindful of the different needs that our families and our kids have from the experience that we already had and the experience that the teachers have gone through, how much this current situation and the virus itself has created high anxiety and many other different issues that our staff members and students have experienced. So as we move forward to continue to take those into consideration, you talk about flexibility, so keeping in mind that social emotional aspect is really important, and really continue to try to find all the different tools for communication with our families and depending of the family as well, because we don't all have, all across cultures, we don't all have the same ways of communication. We don't use the same tools. So please continue to keep that in mind. And thank you for being here tonight. Director Bennett.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I just had some questions on the online school, and that's kind of probably where my biggest concerns are, just because it's brand new. So I guess to borrow an Andyism, are we going to be able to fully construct this airplane in the hangar, or are we going to be constructing this airplane in the sky due to the short runway that we have?
So we switched metaphors from a skeleton to an airplane.
Well, I just love to, when he built the airplane in the sky. He has the best Andyisms. Someone should follow him around with a book and just start scribing all of these little Andyisms and make them release it somewhere.
I'll paraphrase some of our digital coordinators' work. Their intent is to plan the first section of online for the fall. So that might be planning the first 2 units. It might be planning the first month or 6 weeks of a full experience. And then to build in the processes as we get going into fall to both support that system as well as build the next set of units and the next set of processes. So we know that, as you noted, that people's capacities are going to be a tricky thing to navigate this fall, especially, but that's the intent. The intent is to be thoughtful, and knowing that we can't build everything in just 3 months, that's just too Herculean a task, just to get that first section solid, and then build a system by which we can continuously improve that model going forward for the next section, the next set of units, the next month.
Okay, and do we know, do you have an enrollment date for the online school planned yet?
When we want to register folks?
Yeah, for registration.
End of July. We figure our best estimate is that we'll get additional guidance from MDE around mid-July. They'll give us a little bit more clarity, and then the end of July is their next stop. We also have that community engagement session in mid-July, July 14th. And so that gives us a window where our community is highly engaged and we have enough clarity and still enough runway that we could actually register students. So we got about a 2-week window there, the end of July, where we could figure out who's interested, and then we can start to do the logistics around those class lists.
Okay, thank you. And the rest of the questions I'll say till we get to July, and you guys will probably have more answers by then anyway. So thank you very much.
Yes.
You'll see a skeleton with some bones, some muscle hanging off of it. And
Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing this guy with some muscles in there. Poor guy. All right. Well, thank you very much for being here tonight.
We appreciate it.
Yes, we're going to move into our last item for our study session. That is the safe and supported schools. And this is session number 3. And we have Assistant Superintendent Dr. Jenna Mitchler. And sorry, you always get to be the last one in our long study sessions. And I just want to make sure, with all school board members, that we're okay here to continue. I understand that it is late, that we had a pretty heavy agenda tonight, but this is a very important conversation that, honestly cannot wait. So I understand if you're tired. I've been up working since 6 in the morning too. But I want to make sure, that we're okay to continue, because we also have other staff members, administration who are present with us tonight. So let's just be mindful of the time as well as we continue. Okay, so we're good to go? All right, Dr. Mitchler.
Thank you, Chair Corman. Good evening again, everyone. So John, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to try to broadcast some slides myself. I wanted to thank you all. So you just apologized to me, but I just wanted to thank you for making this again a priority and making the time for this again tonight, because this is the 3rd of 3 sessions that we committed to in June around safe and supportive schools, and really sort of is the bookend for us of our thinking through safe and supportive schools for these last couple of meetings. So I'm just going to take a minute to broadcast a couple of slides that I'm going to share with you. All right, could I have verbal confirmation that you can see the slides?
Yep, we can see it.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'm just going to start right off with the purpose of this this portion of our of our Safe and Supportive Schools work. So tonight I wanted to just briefly review our Safe and Supportive Schools plan as a district priority. So this is something we've been talking about, as I said, the last several weeks, but just to reiterate why it's a priority and that it is a priority for our district. And then I want to propose some relevant policies that over the course of the next year or more, we might continue to take up and review as a part of our Safe and Supportive Schools work, and then just briefly talk about some of our next steps. So, you know, I generally start off with our mission statement, but I truly do want to make sure that we're grounded in the idea that we really do want all of our learners to have the ability to thrive in a rapidly changing world. And that is really key to what we're trying to accomplish here with our Safe and Supportive Schools plan. So why might we want a Safe and Supportive Schools plan? Part of what you all approved in the resolution tonight around Safe and Supportive Schools was this phrase, which I have articulated here. It's that our Safe and Supportive Schools create conditions that are necessary to foster success. And when we talk about success, we're really talking about success for all of our students and also for our staff, and really to create a space that works for our families as well. In the last couple of sessions that we reviewed our Safe and Supportive Schools work together, I described that we're trying to use and continue to strengthen a multi-tiered system of supports. And at our last session, you might recall, we talked about what it looks like to work with Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. We're talking about something for all students with Tier 1, for some students at Tier 2, that extra scoop of something additional, and then Tier 3, small groups of students. And that really we're working on ensuring equity and access for all students. And that's the foundation of this work, the equity and access work. The three areas of our Safe and Supportive Schools plan are climate of care, tailored instruction, and meaningful engagement. So that's again a review from our last study session and also the board meeting prior on June 8th, where we reviewed what those three key areas are for our Safe and Supportive Schools work. But again, I want to emphasize that equity and access work really is the foundation of all of this, ensuring that all of our learners have the ability and the opportunity to thrive in a rapidly changing world. So with that, I'll move into the second part of the presentation, which was around policies, relevant policies for us to take up in future work. You'll notice here that this is a list of policies that most will look familiar to you. They were policies that Director of Educational Equity, Dina Wade-Ardley, and I brought before you in March when we approved our next 3-year equity plan. And we talked through some of these policies, just briefly mentioning that they'd be important for us to take up and think through with a lens of equity and access as we're reviewing in the future. And with that, I'll leave you with one thought around next steps, is that with regard to school board leadership, and again, this is reflecting back to what we discussed at the last school board study session, that you might consider as a school board, perhaps as you think about your goals for next year, really valuing safe and supportive schools as a key part of our work together. And you might consider thinking about how safe and supportive schools, and specifically cultural proficiency, which is the framework and the tools that we'll be taking up as a district for our equity and access work, is reflected in the strategic plan, which I heard mentioned tonight at the school board meeting, reflected in our board policies as we work through doing budget restructuring in the future, and then implementing anything that we are implementing across the district and making sure we're supporting it district-wide. So you might choose to take up some of this vocabulary as you're thinking through what your goals and your priorities are for the future, for next year. And that's what I had with you for you tonight. So again, it's just a bookend to sort of recap some of the things that we've talked through these last 3 sessions together, and then help reiterate for you what would be helpful in order to move us forward with our equity and access work. So with that, I'm going to stop presenting. And thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. Comments, questions, discussion? Director Sorum.
Jenna, when did the Safe and Supportive Schools first, the act, I guess it was, when did that happen? In the state, and I don't know if it's from national to state or if it's from state to national or whatever it is, but the act that they actually had legislatively.
Yeah, that's a good question, Director Sorum. And you know, it's really something that's evolved over time, right? And so we've talked for a long time about how in districts we really want to value creating safe spaces and supportive spaces for students. But specifically the act, I'd have to look back to find the exact date for you, and I can do that. But you know, there's some other pieces that come along with that. And so, you know, one of them being the way we consider our funding as well, because there is some funding that's provided around safe and supportive schools. So I'll do a little bit of homework. I'll go back and find the exact date for you, and I can let you know.
Well, only because if once MDE gets a notion like this, and then all of a sudden passes it on to the districts, then various districts do various plans under the title of safe and supportive schools. You know, if there's some kind of, like, they talked about it before, you've talked about before, a universal care type thing, universal design, personalized for students, staff, and community. So some of that stuff, you know, I have to give you credit for doing all this, bringing it to our attention and working with Dina or whoever else it was to do these types of things. But just to get the original date of when this all happened. Thank you.
Yep, I can do that.
Director Bennett.
Yes, thank you very much for this, Shanna. The question I have is kind of like a big picture of the safe and supportive school plan. Is this, I kind of wonder who's doing the work of all this. Is it pretty much your department, and then you take what you find to another department, and it's kind of like siloed like that? Or is it more the collaborative effort where you have like a member from each department with representation, and you guys are kind of working on these things?
Yeah, that's a great question too, Director Bennett. So we, as I've talked about in the past, have taken up a design thinking approach to creating the Safe and Supportive Schools plan, developing what these priorities are for the district. And through doing that, we've brought together groups of folks from all over the district. We've brought in representatives from the student groups. We've connected with the community, of course, doing that empathize piece to try to get some data from our community. And so, you know, the work has been made up of several groups, but they're definitely groups that represent different staff from throughout the district. So it's been very collaborative with regard to the development of those three key areas. Now, I mean, you have to, it's nothing really, I think, works all that well unless there is someone who is the leader, right, and can pull folks together and help facilitate the process. And so that is something that we do within learning supports. But, you know, as you can see from the titles of those three key areas, tailored instruction, right, is very much about learning and teaching and curriculum and instruction and special education, how we're meeting students' needs within special education, EL services, et cetera. So we really do work to make sure that we have representation from all of those areas on the teams that are working through developing out those plans.
Okay, and is there any opportunity for, say, like students to have a voice on this, like maybe BSAC students or something, or other students, or is there any opportunity for parent voice, like maybe someone from PTSA or some other way to get some parent involvement to get their feedback as well?
Most certainly. That is at the core of design thinking. And so you might remember back in the fall when we were running through the process to develop these three key areas, we came to BSAC several times. I think it was 3 or 4 times to get some feedback from them, try to figure out what it is that they as stakeholders would want as student leaders. We also sent out surveys through our parent advisory committees at each building. So the principals were working with their parent advisory teams to send out some surveys to get information. And then we looked back at data that we'd already collected through other means. So for example, our equity audit data, looked at some of the data that had been collected through our PLC facilitator surveys. So getting some of that staff data and feedback as well. And sifting through all of that as part of that empathizing with stakeholders phase back in the fall took us about 3 months. And it was a pretty comprehensive process, but it felt like it was effective and that we were able to really get a good picture of what our end users, what our stakeholders want out of a safe and supportive schools plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for the question. It's a similar process to what we're using to get some stakeholder feedback and process it for our fall planning as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I see that I'm getting a message from Mrs. Blanco here that we're closing at 10:30. So just, I feel kind of like we're rushing here once again. Yeah, Dr. Mitchler.
One thing I would just add, so I just did a quick search on MDE's website, and I can give you the information now. So the Safe and Supportive Schools Act in Minnesota was passed in April of 2014, so that you have that information.
Yeah, thank you for that information. And I just want to say once again, thank you for the wonderful work that you're doing around this Safe and Supportive Schools initiative. And then a couple of things that I would really like, personally would like to see happening. I don't know what the other board members think about it, but if you can work, this is part of this plan as well, working on creating those affinity groups in our district. I think it's very important, for our staff members of color. This is something that many school districts have, and if we can, look into that and how we can start and when we can start. I know that people already talk amongst themselves, and I think it's important to give that kind of space for our staff members so that they are that they're able to really get together and work together and provide feedback for our school district as well. So please look into that with Dina. And once again, I don't know how other board members feel, and we can talk about that another time as well. The parent groups, kind of bringing those parent groups, those voices back again. We have the PTA, but we also have other different parent groups that we had in the past. We need to bring those back again. We need to figure out once again, with the Latino Parent Association or Somali Parent Network, so they can be included in this work. Once again, like Director Bennett said, our student voices too. How do we strengthen those relationships with our students, with our teachers, and with different groups that we have in the district? And work in collaboration, very important, and I think that goes to everyone, and I think we're doing a great job we've been doing a great job of working together around the safe and supportive schools, and I think it's very important that we continue to find that type of collaboration amongst members of the cabinet, administration in general. We have a lot of people with excellent expertise, ideas, and that we can go to and work together, because this is only going to work if we're working together in collaboration. And also it's going to work if we can, as board members, continue to support this and continue to model, beyond the words with our actions in the work that we're going to be doing. So something to bring back, this type of conversation is going to be good to bring back during our meeting that we will have at a study session about board goals and superintendent goals. So it had purposely been said so that we only have those two items, and so we can have some robust conversation. So I'd like to invite our board members to keep that in mind when we come to that conversation that day. Okay? Okay. Yes, Director Bennett.
Just quickly, I just wanted to read a comment that Beth just put out there. She said she agrees about the affinity group that was brought up by the Reimagine Minnesota group time. Just make sure that that was read.
Yeah, and Director Bibi, I brought up that that concept, so I'll take credit for that one during the Reimagine Minnesota time. So I think it is very important. So thank you. Okay, I think it is 10:30, and please let's continue this conversation with Director Mitch, oh my gosh, I'm tired now, Dr. Mitchler, in the following days and amongst ourselves. Okay, and yeah, definitely when we get together again for those board goals, let's bring back those different aspects as well. Yeah. Is there anything else? Anything else that superintendent would like to add to this? Not at this time. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Yeah. Were you gonna say something?
No, 10:30 is a board policy as far as we need to adjourn by 10:30. There's a board policy.
Exactly. So it is 10:30 exactly. So we're gonna adjourn here tonight. So thank you all for being here tonight and hanging in there. Late time. So we're ending this meeting. Have a good night.